Well, good morning to everybody. It's Peter Russell here from Oxlet Business. Welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to wait and check that we've got everybody joining, and we'll get underway in a few moments. I'm joined today by my colleague Georgia. Georgia, if you're still listening, can you let us know when we've got when everybody's signed on? And some people might still be trying to join.
Yeah, that's fine. I can let you know.
How many have we got so far?
So we have 2 at the moment.
Okay, let's hang on for a little bit then. So I can see that Chris has joined us. Morning, Chris and Ron. Looks like Darren's just joined us. Morning, Darren. Just to let you know, Darren, I think everybody's muted at the moment. You should be able to unmute yourself, but you don't need to do that for the moment. We're just waiting for a couple more people. Oh, Darren, yeah, you've unmuted yourself. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Peter. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, you too.
Hello, Ron. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning.
I'm just playing with this technology, so I can now see who's muted and who's not, which is great. I think everybody's camera is automatically off. I suggest we leave it that way for the moment. Chris, can I just check that you can hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant.
Fantastic.
Okay, so
hi.
If you guys get some background noise or anything, feel free to sort of mute yourself again or unmute. There's only a small number of us on today's session, which I'll explain a little bit about obviously in a minute. Looks like Verina's just joining us. Hi, Verina. I'm actually just signing in. Good morning, Verina. It's Peter here, Peter Russell. How are you today? If you can unmute yourself, you might be able to say hello. Still joining in, I think, Verina. So I think actually, Georgia, we're just waiting for one person. We'll give it a minute, if that's okay with everybody.
You know, we're talking about those maths. You know, the one under my keyboard that's out of date.
So I'm not sure, Verina, and if Verina can hear me, just you may want to unmute your microphone. I've got a little warning sign up that you're actually, oh, here we go. Maybe there. Georgia, I think we're waiting for one person, but I'm going to suggest that we get underway.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, and then so just to let everybody else know, we may be joined by one more person. But anyway, so good morning, everybody. Peter Russell from Oxlet Business. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are a small but select group this morning, which I hope makes the opportunity for the session to be a little bit more interactive. For the moment, I suggest I will let you know. So if you have any difficulties with connections or with hearing me or seeing what I'm showing, then either unmute yourself and let us know, You should be able to do that from the control panel if you've not already found it. This is on GoToWebinar. Or indeed on the same control panel, you should be able to use and see the chat box. You can choose who to send your chat to, but I suggest if it's a technical question, you just send it to the organisers and it will get picked up by my colleague Georgia. And if it's a question about the content and what we're covering today, then obviously make that available if that's okay with you for everybody. So I will launch straight away into the content for today. I'll give you a little bit of background about why we're doing these webinars. I will invite you to participate a little bit later on, if that's okay. So a few housekeeping items. We are recording this. I'm not sure if we'll be using this recording. We may edit. If you'd rather not be have the recording shared, then please let us know. So it's mainly for our internal purposes at the moment. I'll be going through some slides, so we will share those slides. So that normally is a question people ask. We'll share them as a PDF probably, so there's no need to make copious notes if you don't really want to. And as I said before, keep yourself on mute, keep your camera off for a moment, but we will invite contributions later on. We'll run for about an hour. With such a small group, that sometimes works different ways, means we might wrap up a little bit early, or we might actually carry on for a little bit longer. And I'm happy to stick around for another 15 minutes after 12 o'clock, even half an hour, if there's particular questions and things coming up. So this is the first in the series of innovation briefings, which we're intending to deliver, organise and deliver really as part of the innovation support for business program moving forward. Probably a couple of months, we'll see how it goes. So you're very much a guinea pig group, and I'd like to get your feedback today, not only on the topic, but also on the nature and the format of this session. Future sessions may take slightly more different formats depending on the topic and the number of people involved. But the intention is that they become fortnightly, at least once a month maybe, and we build up a bit of a community around the innovation program. So hopefully it's an opportunity for you to actually propose topics as well as the ones which I and my colleagues come up with. The idea of the briefings is to inform and introduce you to resources, if you like, topics of interest and resources that might be available to you in your innovation journey and in your innovation challenges. There's a lot on offer, but it's quite complex to locate it and find it sometimes. So the idea of these sessions is to bring things to your attention, and then we can go into more detail of the interesting ones, share some knowledge amongst ourselves, and create that community of people involved in the program, which is something that, because we've been so busy, we haven't really had much of an opportunity to do. So if that's okay, that's a little bit of background about why we're doing this thing. Let's have a little bit of look now at what we're going to cover today. So today is about finding funds for innovation. This is the topics that I'm going to cover today. Georgia, can I just check with you that that's coming up okay on your screen?
Yeah, all good.
Excellent, thanks very much. So what today is about is kind of how do you go about the process of looking for funding for innovation? Where do you look in particular is what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to explain in a minute why I'm talking about jigsaw puzzles and roadmaps, and then we'll look at Oxlep's funds, some funds from Innovate UK, which is an organisation I expect you're a little bit familiar with. We'll talk a little bit about Europe, some other local funds and miscellaneous funds, and then some more creative thinking about how you might get work done. And I want to also spend a little bit of time today talking about crowdfunding and the different types of mechanisms that are available to us these days for innovation project funding. There is another session planned, which I know some of you are booked onto, which is great. The next session is on the 15th of December, same time, a Tuesday morning. I hope you can attend that. Today we're talking about where and who from you might get funds. In the session on the 15th of December, we'll be talking about some key concepts underpinning most of those funding schemes. So some general ideas about why innovation funding applications are different from just a normal sort of grant that you might get through the council or even through OXLEP at the moment because of the COVID opportunities. So we'll talk about some tools and techniques which I use regularly and which you can use in your application planning and submission, and how to improve your chances of success. So session 1 and session 2 are very much linked. Hope you can attend the next session. If not, we'll probably be rerunning it in the new year. But today is about where from. Now, I'd like to explain why straight away I'm talking about a jigsaw puzzle. So I use the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle because the sources of funds for innovation are many and complex. So here's a very simple little jigsaw puzzle with some of those sources of funding which you probably recognize. Some of them you may not recognize. I mean, most people I work with have been through a fair amount of their own money in the top left-hand corner. If they are in a profitable situation, they're probably already ploughing it back. But, you know, now they're beginning to look elsewhere for funding. And one of the ones that that people often arrive on eventually but neglect in the beginning is our research and development tax credits, for example, and things like asset financing or discount invoicing is a way that people use to find funds for their innovation projects, which are not normally the first things that they come to. Down the bottom, you see some of the more recognized sources like venture capital. Perhaps you've thought about charities, perhaps not. We'll talk a little bit about that today, and foundations. But the point really that I want to make is that some creativity is needed when you're looking for innovation funding. I'm going to talk about some particular sources this morning, absolutely, and some particular organizations. But thinking laterally and creatively is what I would encourage you to do. People quite often leap towards grants when there are other sources available to them for at least some of the project costs that they're trying to put together. For example, are there ways to get work done? So the things that you're trying to do yourselves or in your teams, is there a way that other people can do that work for you? Can you get resources in to make progress on those objectives without having to actually spend your own time and money on it? Obviously, that sounds like an ideal situation, and we'll look at a couple of opportunities for that sort of thing. Just a quick bit of background. We're mainly going to talk today about sources of funding for SMEs, and I think you're all SMEs, so you're in that category. We're also talking about sources of funding for projects. Most innovation grant funding is about funding for projects rather than funding the business as a whole. Obviously, if you get as far as things like venture capital, they're kind of more interested in the business as a whole. The kind of things that we deal with at OXLEP are more to do with funding a particular part of your overall innovation journey. So a project, if you like, something with a beginning, a middle, an end, and a deliverable. And it's very much those deliverables and normal project characteristics like milestones and things which form the basis of most innovation funding applications. So think laterally and creatively is also about the source of these potential grants, if you like. And I'll try and illustrate this through the session, but I'd like you to think about who cares about what you're trying to do? And is that a slightly broader audience than the initial audience, the most obvious audience? What initiatives, movements, trends, or policies could you align yourself to? And we'll talk about some examples, but let's say, for example, there are some environmental benefits to the technology or the project that you're trying to pursue. Then obviously you should align yourself with organizations that are supporting that kind of activity. It may not be immediately obvious because you might be working in a different sector entirely or a different industry, but there may be organizations that are supporting the objective rather than the industry itself. And the funding that they offer might be similarly sort of promoted about the objective rather than the sector or the industry. And we'll talk again about the last point there, or the two last points. Who else could you work alongside? And is your understanding of innovation the same as the people that you're targeting? So these are things that you kind of need to, if you can, think a little bit creatively and laterally about in order to broaden the range of sources that you might try and find funding through. So it's about projects, and it's about thinking creatively about where those funding sources might come to. But of course, you probably joined this webinar hoping to learn a little about particular grant sources and organizations, and I'll get on to that side of the session now. Just going back to the previous slide, one of the search engines that, by the way, just a reminder, you will get these slides. So one of the search engines that's available to you is indicated there at the bottom of the slide. Now, these search engines are government backed and are going through some changes at the moment, but they are a good place to start. Most things eventually find their way onto these engines if they have some kind of government backing, and it's worth the time and effort of trawling through. And you can allocate, you can narrow your search to the sectors and industries that are interesting to you. But that's why I'm suggesting, again, to think creatively about that. Now, some of you I've been working with recently, and you're already involved with Oxlep's own funds. And I just want to quickly run through what we've got on offer, just as a reminder. And this is the main source. Now, the one that I deal with my colleagues, obviously, is Oxlep's Go Create Fund, part of the Innovation Support for Business programme. Some of you are already beginning to benefit from that. Up to 25% contribution, and I know that that makes it difficult to apply because you have to get your cash flow sorted out and make a significant contribution to those costs yourselves. But we are beginning to fund some projects up to the grant value, the maximum grant value of £50,000, which is great. And one just quick update on Oxlep's own funds, the Go Create Fund. It now includes some capital elements as well as revenue elements. So that's something that, some flexibility that we've managed to introduce, and we would invite people who are already recipients of the award to get in touch with us if there's some extra stuff that they might like to apply for, because I think that's one of the flexible elements we're allowed to do. Or if you're thinking about an application now, of course, you can include some capital elements as well. Now, many of the people that I'm working with are also looking at our Escalate funding, or our funding under the Escalate program. I apologize for all these different brand names and identifiers, but that's a result of where these funds come from, which is primarily European Regional Development Fund from Europe. So this is aimed as SMEs as well, primarily originally purpose-driven businesses or social enterprises, which I don't know, I can't remember offhand if any of you are constituted that way or could be. There's some flexibility now in this program as well to support high potential growth companies and also those seeking to improve their investment readiness and the activities around that. Now, that's not necessarily innovation funding, but some of our clients are putting in successful applications for Escalate for activities which are broadly supporting their innovation journey because they're growth activities. That has a slightly smaller total grant value of £25,000, but it's on a 50-50 basis, so it's a little bit more attractive. So if you're interested in Escalate as well as Go Create, I can talk to you a little bit about that, and you can obviously find out more about those funding, Oxlep's own funding sources on our web pages, which are kept pretty much up to date. It's also worth you regularly reviewing these web pages because of COVID and the situation that we're in at the moment, not least with Brexit, the availability of Oxlep's own funds is changing all the time. So those web pages are the best place to look. Have a look at this over the next couple of days, because there's also a scheme called Kickstart, which some of you may have benefited from, which is just a small grant scheme for some capital items or technology important to help you with your sort of COVID resilience activities, which broadly speaking could be innovation activities as well. And if you've not benefited already from Kickstart, I think it's being relaunched with whatever funding it's got available today or tomorrow. So that's Oxlep's own funds, and I'm more than happy to talk to you on a one-to-one basis, as I am already with some of you, about how you might benefit from those. And I can help you with your applications in this case as well. What I'd like to talk about now is the main source of funding for innovation in the UK, which is from an organisation called Innovate UK. Innovate UK is now part of the umbrella organisation UK Research and Innovation. So there are always changes going on in the way that these organisations are aligned. But Innovate UK, the UK research organisations, and a number of other partners now come under this umbrella of UKRI. Innovate UK itself has been around in various guises for quite a long time, describes itself as the UK's innovation agency, and has, it's quite a sizable organisation, so about 500 people with HQ'd around Swindon, but obviously with team members located all around the country, many of them with technology or sector kind of focuses. So they put out a large number and a wide variety of innovation funding opportunities. I'm sure some of you are aware or been involved with some applications. So I'm going to talk about one or two particular schemes that Innovate UK deal with. Their purpose is to de-risk, enable and support innovation. They have a governance structure which is industry-led, which is great because it means that they do have a reasonable business focus, although I know some of you may want to argue with that somewhat. And they do support business across all the UK regions and businesses of all sizes, although obviously if we're interested today in mainly the SME stuff. They are strategic in that they sent in the sense that their money is available for priority areas, be that geographic, technical or sectoral. And the way that they behave very much is like an investor. They look for a return on the investment. It's a return to UK PLC. It's not a return that you have to pay the money back at some sort of interest rate, although they have the lending schemes now as well. But when you put in an application for Innovate UK funding, they very much are looking for what is that return that the economy is going to get, as well as the return that you get as an individual business. They mainly work through competitions, but increasingly they're also behaving and offering loan schemes. So they're acting as a lender, not a lender of last resort necessarily, but a lender to particular types of businesses around addressing particular challenges which the government's identified. They also behave sometimes as a procurer, and there's a scheme in particular where the government or some of the agencies or departments of government have identified a particular need, and they realize that it's a challenge for that need to be met. So they put out a competition and invite people to compete for funding at quite an attractive rate of funding to address those challenges. And in Oxfordshire, we've got a fair number of companies that have been successful in those applications. So again, when you get these slides, you'll be able to follow this link. The thing is, though, over the last literally week or two, they have been moving this search engine, which is the funding service, onto a slightly different platform, which is under the umbrella of UKRI. Still works much the same way. But at the moment, it's probably worth looking on both platforms as to where these current opportunities for funding are being published. Okay, so let's have a little brief think about what are the characteristics of projects suitable for Innovate UK support. This is very much a personal perspective. So in years of dealing with Innovate UK or its predecessors, what do I think about the kind of activities and things that they want to support? So generally speaking, from Innovate UK, it's not about fundamental or basic research. We have to be nearer to exploitation and commercialization. It has to be nearer to the market. And in your application, you have to talk about what is the market opportunity. I don't think there are many applications, even where there are some significant innovations to be done and the market is some way off, where you don't have to provide information about those markets and that potential. If it includes export, even the better. Innovate UK do have their own terminology, their own categorization of research and development and innovation activity, and I've listed the main ones there that you'll see feature on more than one program. The point about that really is that you may have a different description of what you're doing. You may have a different definition of what a feasibility study is or what industrial research is. But it's a good idea to understand the way that they think about this so that you can align your application to the right part of the fund, or indeed the right fund full stop. So if they are trying to put some money towards some feasibility studies and you apply for something which is much nearer the commercialization end, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. I've mentioned the need for a clear exploitation route. and impact. And a weakness of many applications is that they don't quantify, or at least attempt to quantify, the impact as well as qualify it. So most applications would benefit from a little bit more work on trying to quantify impact in economic, commercial, or other terminology. So there could be societal benefits, for example, and if they can be measured, then it's attractive to Innovate UK. Innovate UK and UKRI publish a number of policies and strategic industrial strategies, if you like, and it's a good idea to have a look at these and align your project, or find where your project might be aligned, because even in the open competitions, they like to see that that you are responding to some of those strategic objectives if possible. Now, in next week's, on the 15th, we'll talk about something called technology readiness levels, TRLs. Basically, this is a way of measuring where you are on the innovation journey and the exploitation journey. And the whole concept is really, or the whole premise, is that you must be moving between TRL levels. Otherwise, why would they give you some funding? What would be the purpose of it? So you're solving a problem, but you're also moving up a TRL level. So a bit more explanation about those concepts next time. But this is the one that obviously causes quite a lot of head scratching. Your idea must be demonstrably and significantly different from anything that has been developed in that area to date. So they're putting the cards on the table here and saying, Innovate UK funding is for significant innovations. So you have to argue why your innovation project is significant, is significantly different. And next time around, we'll talk about ways that you can actually do that. Oxlap's funding, which I talked about before, we don't worry about that quite so much. We want innovation, but if it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit some other communities and stakeholders and the region as a whole, you're not sort of compared to the rest of the landscape, if you like, of potential applicants in the same way that you will be with an Innovate UK support. And some of the applications into Innovate UK simply get rejected because they're not significantly innovative enough. Somebody somewhere else is trying it, has done it, etc., etc. But more about that kind of stuff on the 15th. So a very quick run through a typical process with the Innovate UK funds. It's online these days. It's been moving that way for a little while. They welcome partnership applications in most schemes, but it's the industrial partner which makes the application. Typically with lots of online things now, you know, you've got a defined word length and you've got templates for things like budgets, but they're not common against all schemes, so be careful. Some schemes are more than one stage. Normally they are assessed by independent panel, and the panel will have technical people as well as commercial people. When your application to go create an Oxlap is considered, it's unlikely that we're going to wheel in an expert in the technology that you're developing. But with Innovate UK, they probably will look for people on their panels, their portfolio of assessors, who do have some understanding of the technology, the market, the sector. So you've got to kind of convince them about the novelty, about the innovation. They can turn around quite quickly. They will give you feedback. If you fail, you can apply again. You can address the weaknesses in your application. I think they have a kind of 3 attempts and you're out type thing. If successful, you will get a monitoring officer and you will be monitored. You may also be audited and it's best to assume that you will be audited. And most of their funding does come under European state aid rules. So if you manage to get a grant from Innovate UK, it will be state aid funding. So smart grants are the main scheme that is open to all, regardless of technology or sector or industry. And I'm not going to run through the too much detail of smart grants because some of you, I think, are already looking at them or have looked in the past. And I'm more than happy to talk to you about smart grants if you think you've got a good application. I'm waiting for the next submission dates to be announced, and the details that I've got here are for the scheme that's kind of just gone, because there's a bit of a gap in between when one scheme closes and the next one opens up, presumably as they align their budgets. But it is for smart, it's for what they call game-changing and disruptive ideas. I mean, it's very ambitious there that have the potential to change the world. So really, we have to together have a very critical look at what you're proposing to see whether or not it's worth it. Is it worth the application? If it is worth the application, then the amount of money that you can get is a little bit more than you can get under our schemes. So it's well worth examining that. But it is a highly competitive scheme. So I don't know what the numbers are, but every application round will receive hundreds of potential applications, whereas we receive, small numbers for our applications. So your chances of success are not great unless you've put in a significant amount of effort into the application. And there are things that you can do to improve your chances of success. So there are different strata under SMART as to what you can get. A minimum project size is typically £25,000, and as a micro or small business, you can typically get up to 70% of project costs. So that's immediately more attractive than ours. If you move into what they call experimental development projects, i.e. nearer to the market, you can get larger amounts of money and longer projects, but a lesser contribution to the overall costs. So you do, like our funds, have to know where the balance of your funding is going to come from. Okay, so I want to talk about some other UK schemes that are available from Innovate UK, and much of their effort is about collaborative R&D. So these are large projects involving more than one partner, and they're generally what we call thematic, meaning that they are on offer to you as a response to particular challenges. So it might be decarbonisation, it might be mobility, it might be electrification of the transport infrastructure, etc., etc. So if you're interested in participating in those kind of longer terms research and development projects, they can be very beneficial to an SME, but you would be one of a number in a consortium. Now we can help at Oxlab with putting together those kind of ideas and proposals, but it is a longer term game. Knowledge transfer partnerships I'm going to talk about in a minute as a way of getting work done, if you remember, was one of the themes that I wanted to come on to. And the Small Business Research Initiative is that one where I said the government is looking to procure a solution to a problem, and they put out a challenge. It's typically funded by another department like the MOD or DEFRA. If you're successful, you can obtain quite a lot of money at a high percentage of the project costs, if not 100% of project costs. So it's quite unusual because not many schemes do that. but they're published on the same place that I showed you before, which is those search engines through .gov.uk or through UKRI. Increasingly, IUK is moving into loans, and they're organising accelerators and catalysts, and some of those come with funds attached. And don't forget that the Innovate UK family of organisations includes something called the Knowledge Transfer Network. And I mention that here because it's a very important way of finding out what's available or what's coming up in particular sectors or around particular challenges, and also potentially developing partnerships. So you can align yourself with other SMEs and maybe some larger organisations to apply for innovation funding. So if anybody's interested in these kinds of schemes, we can investigate them together. That's what I would like to suggest this morning. Europe is obviously another source of funding. We get some of our funds from Europe. You can apply directly into Europe under schemes such as Horizon, well, mainly they're all under the umbrella of the EU's umbrella programme for R&D, which is Horizon 2020, or indeed through individual schemes like the SME instrument, which is the third or fourth bullet point down there. This can give you quite significant levels of funding, but it is even more competitive, arguably, than Innovate UK. And I'm not going to go into it in great detail today because A, I don't have time, and B, I'm not sure what the European situation is, to be honest. We're going to find out soon just how we can participate in these schemes in the future. But I have worked with quite a lot of SMEs that benefit greatly from this kind of funding. Okay, so let's quickly run through. I'm sort of going to run through these next slides quite quickly because I'd like to soon invite you to unmute yourselves and either use the chat box for questions or indeed unmute yourself and let's put those questions and get a bit of a discussion going in the time that we've got remaining. Here are some local funds. Ox Futures for low carbon projects up to 25k on a 50-50 basis, I believe is still open at the moment, accepting applications. And you can find similar things through networks like Oxfordshire Green Tech. Quite often we've got such a rich innovation ecosystem that you may find particular funds available to you if you are willing to collaborate with organisations located at Harwell, for example, at Culham. And then there are local initiatives like the one that we've been working with called The Hill up at the Oxford University Hospital, the NHS at John Radcliffe, which are supporting specifically schemes around topics such as digital health. There's too many potential little opportunities either for networking or getting work done for me to mention here. And the general theme, general message I have is that if you do your own searching using the kind of links that I've provided, then I can discuss with you whether or not we think they are likely to be applicable to you before you go to the bother of making an application. Under the theme of getting work done, and again, this goes back to being creative about how you might get your innovation project underway or accelerated. There are quite a few schemes around that enable you to get work done either by experts or by people with appropriate facilities, and it's free or subsidized. So the Knowledge Transfer Partnerships is a scheme that Innovate UK organise where you would get a highly qualified recent graduate, a postgraduate even, to work on a significant project in your business over a period of 18 months onwards. You do have to pay for that, but it's highly subsidised. Similarly, you could look to sponsoring a PhD or using student projects and student consultancy just for maybe smaller exercises, doing some market research in your behalf, for example. The Enterprise Europe network is run by a local organisation, Oxford Innovation Services, and was giving up to 9 days business development consultancy, which is a lot in business support terms, and also a lot of help with finding partners and access to finance. I need to find out whether it's still available, because I expect they're a little bit in limbo at the moment as well. But it's an example of, you know, these innovation schemes which are evolving at the moment that enable you to get the help that you need rather than perhaps just cash. Similarly, there's one recently announced, and this is just for example, there's a measurement for recovery program which enables you to work with somebody like the National Physical Laboratory or its partners and can give you up to 20 days of expert time. So if you've got a particular measurement or technical challenge, it's quite likely they've got people that can help you solve these analysis issues, and they will pay for it, basically. So they're subsidized by the government to do that. So rather than look for cash, which you then pay somebody to do or try and pay yourselves, you're getting other organizations to be part of the process. And nearly my final slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about crowdfunding, because it's become one of the common ways which early innovators get their projects supported. And I've put it down here as a still emerging global industry. It's actually been around for quite some time, and the principle of crowdfunding has been around forever, to be honest. But during the financial crisis and supported by the power of the technology, if you like, we've seen an explosion of opportunities for crowdfunding through these platforms that you've probably heard of, such as Crowdcube, Crowdfunder, Kickstarter. And more of my clients are using some of these campaigns, are using this method to obtain some funding, normally at a relatively early stage of their innovation journey. So they get some work done through something like this, and they build up a bit of traction, they build up a bit of market identity, do some feasibility or prototyping work, prove the concept, and then they're in a better position to actually go out for some of the larger grants. There's 4 basic models. You know, it's a donation model where it's a simple sort of participate because this is a good thing I'm trying to do. There's a reward model where the funders get obviously some kind of reward from participating. And now what we're seeing more of course, is this peer-to-peer type loan models or crowdfunding for equity contributions. And of course, there's lots of things in between. Now, I'm hoping that in the future, we'll run a session on crowdfunding and get some experts to talk to us about how they put a campaign together. The one thing that I've learned is that the launch of your campaign is very much not the beginning. It may be the beginning of the end, but most successful crowdfunding efforts take months to put together, and probably some considerable resources as well. It's definitely not money for nothing. Success comes from a significant investment in time, effort, and for example, the preparation of quality pitches. But if you're interested in crowdfunding, I'd be interested to talk to you about whether or not we can get one of these sessions organised around how to put together a good crowdfunding campaign and what are the best platforms to aim for. Some of which, by the way, were launched and started in Oxford. So Cedars and a couple of the others are actually Oxford graduates that have seen an opportunity in this burgeoning fintech marketplace and have developed very successful businesses, which you can benefit from now as well. So just to wrap up, because then, as I say, I'd invite you to submit some questions or let's have a chat about some of the topics that I've tried to cover. I can help you develop your own funding roadmap. I don't have a huge amount of time individually, but broadly speaking, I've suggested that there's a jigsaw puzzle of opportunity out there. And the challenge for you is to try and put a roadmap together of how you might work through some of these opportunities and get funding for your project at different times and at different parts of your innovation journey. I can also help you with looking at sources. I can't really, it's difficult for us at Oxlep to do the searching on your behalf because we'd just be doing that endlessly. There are people that will do that for you. Some of them will want to charge quite a lot of money, or you can do it yourself. And if you take the creative approach that I've suggested, you may find some sources which are not immediately obvious. I can also help with doing things like an innovation audit or an IP audit to see what you've got in the way of exploitable innovation and technology that might benefit from some funding to take forward. And just a reminder that at the next session, we'll go over some of these underlying concepts that that would help you with a successful application, regardless of the innovation funding source that some of which we've talked about today. I was asked by my colleagues to mention peer networks. I think a couple of you are already engaged in those. It's an initiative we currently have running and it's still open and we're still recruiting. I find it's an extremely powerful mechanism for developing both yourself and your ideas about how to develop your business. And these are offered free of charge at the moment, thanks to some government funding. And so if you'd like to get involved in one of these networks, which involves a bit of time commitment, that's all, but not massive, and then please do get in touch. You have to be operating for a year, have 5 employees and turnover at least over 100K, but there may be some flexibility in that criteria. Okay, so I've been talking far too much.